Here in Vet Life Reimagined, we talk about mentorship and support because they're essential to thriving in veterinary medicine. The Ready Vet Go mentorship program helps early career veterinarians confidently transition from student to successful practitioner with real world guidance on communication, time management, well being, and case discussions. It's perfect for individuals or practices without a formal mentorship program. Enrollment for the October cohort closes Friday, September 12th. Use code SPRINKLE for 10% off at Ready Vet Go. Link in the show notes. That's code SPRINKLE, SPRINKLE.
There are maybe other people like me who might have been interested in working on a farm. And if we can recruit some of those people and help them see that this is a possibility, this is a career choice that you could make. And just because you didn't grow up on a farm doesn't mean that you can't get a job here.
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined. How does a girl from suburban San Francisco become one of the most influential dairy veterinarians? That's only part of today's story. Dr. Michelle Schack, known to her substantial social media following as the DairyDoc, is a multi-species veterinarian, educator, co-founder of the dairy education platform DairyKind, and a champion of compassion-driven agriculture. She brings a rare blend of veterinary expertise, social media savvy, and educational innovation. In our conversation, she shares two of her core beliefs, the value of open-mindedness and the power of our professional networks. Even if your focus is in companion animals, Dr. Schack's journey has tremendous relevance. She reminds us that no matter the species, dog, cat, horse, cow, or even emu, yes, you'll want to hear that story, the veterinary profession thrives on connection, curiosity, and education. So let's jump into my conversation with Dr. Michelle Schack. When did you know that you were interested in veterinary medicine?
When I was a very small child, as long as I could remember, I was a very curious kid. So I was always asking, how does this work? Or how do these things work? And I always wanted to be a veterinarian and something else. Like I wanted to be a veterinarian and a firefighter at one time. I wanted to be a veterinarian and a farmer at one time. I wanted to be a veterinarian and a road builder because I learned how roads are built. And so I was going to be a veterinarian and a road builder at one time. I can remember all these things, and so many other careers came and went as I was just interested in the world around me. But veterinarian was always a strong point in my career future that I imagined for myself.
You were not the first person that I've heard say that. And I think maybe that goes to the scientist in us too, that we're very curious about things and we like to understand how things work. And so maybe that's part of it. And the good thing is you can have lots of interest in this profession too. So maybe we'll get to talk to some of those. I don't think you build roads, but we'll see. Now, you grew up not in agriculture. You grew up in suburbia, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So did you think mainly cat and dog when you were little?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, and the only veterinarians I had ever met were the veterinarians that we use for our dogs. And I don't think it ever crossed my mind that there were veterinarians for other species until I went to college because I just didn't interact with those other species. And so it wasn't a thought in my mind. And then when I went to college, I got to work with a lot of different species, and it was very cool to work with a lot of different veterinarians. And at that time, I actually shadowed a dog and cat vet. And that was the first time I had done that. And I thought, oh, this is not for me. I don't want to be in an office all day. And it was a little bit of a moment where I had to really think about this is something that I'd wanted to do my entire life. And I went to UC Davis for undergrad, knowing they had a vet school there and hoping that going there would get me the experience to be able to get into vet school. And I remember thinking, oh no, this is not what I want to do. And so I started exploring other species through my animal science classes. I got exposed to livestock, but I also thought, well, if I'm enjoying working with cattle, what else is there? I spent a summer working at a zoo. I did a week-long trip working with sea lions. I did some externships working with horses. And I just tried to get as many different species under my belt as possible, exposure to them at least, so I could see kind of what the lifestyles were like. Because I think in veterinary medicine, as much as you want to be a veterinarian, you have to consider the lifestyle also. There's no matter what career you choose, there's so many different tracks you can take and different animals you can work with. But even within those, there's different schedules and on call or not, and work from home or be in an office, or fast paced or slow paced, or mobile or in a clinic. There's so many different types of veterinary medicine, and that lifestyle piece is a big part because you have to enjoy what you're doing.
Amen. And so if I remember correctly, you discovered that production medicine was something that you were interested in college and getting into that vet school time. And, bringing that back up, the lifestyle, when you were saying, oh, wow, production medicine is really cool, what were you seeing about the lifestyle that was intriguing to you, and anything else that directed you towards production medicine?
Well, I really liked the people. As much as I have thought all my life that I'm an animal person, I think I'm a people person. And and I really like the people that I work with. The farmers and ranchers do a great job, and their perspective and their outlook on things is different than if it was a pet. They're a little more practical, and they're weighing their decisions a little bit differently. And there's more at play too. It's not just one animal at a time, but you're looking at the herd overall, as well as food safety. And those things were very interesting to me, have always been very interesting to me. So I was really enjoying working with the animals, but also with the people. But then thinking about the lifestyle, I really like going to one farm and devoting 100% of my time to that farm, one at a time. And when I'm there, I'm working hard and doing everything I can on that farm for sometimes hours and hours and hours on end. Like, I might be at a farm for 6 or 7 hours, and that's my whole day is working on one farm. And then other days, maybe I go to 3 different farms. But I like to go there and spend as much time as I need, and then dedicate that whole time to that farm and do everything I can at that time. And then I like the drive time in between. I drive really far. I'm in Arizona, and the farms are not close together here. So I do a lot of driving. And I actually like that. Although I don't love driving itself, it really kind of helps reset my mind and get ready for the next appointment or the next visit that I'm going to do, and be able to prepare, and also kind of have that check out time from the last appointment too. I think that was one thing that I didn't like about small animal is seeing appointments every 15 minutes is very exhausting. And then you're still trying to you just get the results back from the last appointment while you're in the next appointment. And so I always felt like I wasn't getting that full level of care that I did on the farm. On the farms, I'm able to really spend time and work with those animals and those people while I'm there. And then I get the follow-up too, because I'm not trying to schedule a follow-up appointment. It's already scheduled because I'm there once a week or every other week. So if we make a recommendation, or we change something, or we work on something on the farm, or I point something out, then I know I'll be back to follow up on that, and I don't have to hope that they schedule again. And that's really nice. That's something that I really like working with large scale farms, is those regular routine visits.
Yeah, it's not something I thought about either. And that really does allow you to build relationships with the people
Yeah.
on the farm, as well as probably the cows, although I know you work on herds that are like crazy big. So I don't know if you know every single cow, but like you, especially again with the people working, you're part of the team basically.
Yes, yes. So we're a big part of the team, and I like that. And I will say we're very lucky. We have really good clients. That may not be the case everywhere, but in my area, our clientele really consider us part of the team. And that's just a joy to be able to do that. And then back to what you said about maybe not knowing every cow. What's interesting is there's always a few cows on each farm that I do know. And the herd has its own sort of characteristics. Like, some herds are more friendly than other herds that are a little more standoffish. And some herds are quick to get up and eat in the mornings, and some herds are slow to get up to eat in the mornings. And there's different things, and it just sort of depends on how the farmer has trained their animals and the routine on that farm, and the cows will respond to that. So yeah, each herd sort of has its personality, I would say.
That's really cool. Backing just a little bit, back in vet school, because I want people to kind of know, like, what's the path? How do I get here? What does it look like? You went into vet school interested in production medicine. I heard you say that you didn't actually know you were going to focus on cows until like later on. And UC Davis is one of those that tracks as well. So it was third year, I think, that you start tracking your species of interest. And another thing that I heard you say on a podcast that I want to bring up just to kind of give perspective is you said of your entire class, 4 tracked large
Yes.
animal.
4 tracked
So
food animal.
food,
Yes.
excuse me, because there's horses and other things. So
Yes.
food animal. So what was that like having such an intimate kind of group of, colleagues that you were working with in vet school?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. That was the funnest time of my whole vet school. So I guess back to your original question. Yes, I wanted to do production animal medicine, but I wasn't really sure I wanted to do dairy. I liked the lifestyle of working with large herds. I had lived at this swine facility and been the herd manager my last 2 years of undergrad, and I really loved pigs. And I was very open to other species as well. And so I was kind of open-minded, but I knew I liked the lifestyle of working with large herds and that production mindset. So it wasn't until my clinical year. During my clinical year, we were able to schedule externships, up to 6 different 2-week externships. And so I took all 6, but each one was a little bit different. I did one dairy. I did one that was beef and small animal. I did one that was all mixed large animal, but more so equine. And I did a swine one. I did a camelid one. I'm probably forgetting one, but I really tried to vary my externships because I wasn't exactly sure what type of medicine I wanted to do. It was interesting as much as I love pigs, and there's not really a lot of swine vets in California, so I didn't have exposure working with them as their veterinarian until that 4th year externship when I actually went to Iowa State. And it was a great experience, but it told me that that was not what I wanted to do. And so I really used that final year to kind of put myself in these different job lifestyles and situations and try out different things. And that was when I decided dairy was it for me. In school, yes, there was 4 of us that tracked food animal medicine. And the way it worked at Davis at the time, I guess I can't say if this is still true, but probably the first half of 3rd year, the equine students and the food animal students were combined. So we did all large animal because we all should know enough about all the different species, right? So that was a really good way to do it. And then that last half of 3rd year was separated out. So the equine students, and then there was small animal students, and then there was the food animal students. And there was a way to mix track, and we did some courses together, like every Friday we did a professional skills course and things like that. But during most of the days, there was just 4 of us in our classes. And that was absolutely the funnest time of veterinary school because I was doing what I really loved. I was loving every minute of it. It was so interesting. I knew a lot of it, but then I was building on the skills that I already knew. When I was doing my small animal courses, I felt really behind because I had never teched, and people who had worked in a small animal clinic or who had worked as a vet tech, like they had at least seen an anesthesia machine and I hadn't. And so I felt like really behind. It was fine. I got caught up, that's the point of school. But when I got to that food animal course, I was like, yes, this is my place. I know these things. I know the basics, so then I can build on them. And it was so fun. And the other 3 students that were with me, we all had a really good time. All of our names started with M, so we were the 4 M's, and all the professors knew us, and it was a really fun time. And every single class was more of a discussion. Instead of being lectured at, we were right there asking questions and discussing things and delving deep into different areas as our interest popped up. And that was really cool because it was a smaller group.
Yeah. The professors, Did they talk about what life is like as a food animal veterinarian? Did they prepare you? Because I think, especially when you're having very conversational based and there's only four of you. So you're really building relationships with your professors and everybody too. What was their perspective choosing that path as a career?
Yes, I loved our professors. We had a really great food animal team, and it was a lot of situational based. So they would talk about, okay, instead of just saying you have a goat that presents with, a lump on its side. They would say, okay, so you've been in the car for this long and then you drive up and you're here to see a goat, but the owner can't find the goat. So now you're running through the field and then, and so they'd kind of put us in that situation so we could kind of imagine what it was like. And that's true story. That's happened to me multiple times where you got to chase down the animal and go find it and see if you can get it. And so that was really helpful. And they also did a lot of, some of them had clinical experience. Some of them, they were residents, were teaching us. Some of them were from other countries and they would talk about what it was like in the other country. And that was really interesting. And so we got kind of a wide perspective. And honestly, I think there's this idea that food animal is always the same, but it depends what part of the country you're living in. And then it also depends on what species you're working on, what your lifestyle is going to be like. It's somewhat similar. We're often mobile. We're driving farm to farm. We're seeing animals. But like if you're doing a lot of small hobby farms or backyard farms, you're not going to be spending 7 hours at one farm. I'm doing that because I'm seeing a herd that has 5,000 animals. So there's a difference depending on what type of farms you're working on and then also what part of the country you're in. And so they described a lot of different situations, and that was helpful to think about.
Yeah, no, I can believe that too. One of the podcasts I was listening to, he mentioned like Amish farms. So, I mean, like if you think about Northeast, I'm sure is very different from the middle of
Yes.
Arizona, not to mention probably temperature differences. But yeah, I can definitely imagine that. Now, also the difference between like a beef herd versus a dairy herd, is there a lot of differences there as well?
Definitely. So like this week, I am going to 4 different dairy farms. And then tomorrow I'll be checking beef cows. And that's a herd that I go to it quarterly. So every 4 months or every 3 months, I'm going there, checking on the cattle there, doing preg checks and whatever else needs to get done while I'm there. So that's a different style of medicine and of life than working with dairy cattle, for sure.
Are they seen a little bit differently, like by the farmers, I guess? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
are beef cattle a little more separated? I didn't know if they have a different type of attachment or just the way they think about the animals.
Well, it's interesting because I hear a lot on social media, people want cows to live a more natural life. And the beef cattle live a very natural life. They're out on the range and somebody will ride a horse around to check on the herd, but they're not being really like closely examined daily like dairy cattle are. Dairy cattle are fully examined several times a day because when they're brought into the milking barn. And at that time, we're assessing if they're lame, we're assessing their body condition, we're assessing their udder fill, we're assessing their milk, and all of these things are happening as they're brought into the milking parlor, and they're walked at least once a day as well by health technicians on the farm. So they get closer exams and they are therefore friendlier because they're just more used to people. It's a training thing. So if you want cows to live the most natural life, then their most natural state is to be separated from people. They are prey animals and they don't want to go near people. However, you can train them to go near people, and that's what dairy cattle are. They're also bred for that docility. But beef cattle, we breed them to be really protective because they're out on the range and we need them to be able to fight back if a coyote comes around or something. So they have some breed differences and some genetic differences that we actually select for, but I don't think they're seen by the farmer or rancher any differently. It's more just how we want them to be and how we want them to interact with people. So we're interacting with them a little bit differently. If the beef cattle are too friendly, then that can affect how well they do out on the range away from people, right? We don't want them to be too reliant on people. We want them to be self-sufficient. And if the dairy cattle are too wary of people, then they can get hard to move and they can be very stressed because they are handled multiple times a day. And so we don't want cattle that are really, really afraid of people to be staying around in the milking herd, because that's not a good life for her either. So it's more just how we interact with them based on what they are doing in their daily lives.
Yeah. Well, I went to Auburn and there was no tracking. So we did everything all 4 years. And my dairy rotation was one of my favorite rotations. And
Yes.
going to see the calves was like what I would do for fun. One, I didn't mind getting up in the morning. I don't know. There's just something neat about the routine and how everything worked. And there was like this very obvious like outcome from it, like the milk production and everything. And I agree. I think the people within those rotations were really fun to
Yeah.
work with, like the professors. There's just a different kind of atmosphere. So I did really enjoy that. And I also am glad to hear that you sound like you've had a lot of great mentorship through this process too, from school, but then going into the first practice, which I think is first and only practice maybe
Yes.
that you've been part of. That's
Yes.
awesome. You've been a vet for 10 years. So do you mind sharing a little bit about how you found the practice and what made it so special?
Anytime I take students, I always encourage them to go to conferences because that's how I found this job. They weren't advertising that they were hiring, but they were kind of open, always looking for the right person to join the team. And they weren't in desperate need of someone. And so they were sort of waiting to see if there was a good fit that came along. And I found this opportunity through someone I met at a conference. And so I think that networking is really, really important, and especially in large animal. Many large animal clinics don't advertise. They do that exact thing. They're just sort of waiting for the right person to come along, or they're looking at past students that they've had. Some do advertise, but there are many more that do not post jobs. They're just looking for the right person. So that networking is so important. I met Callie Willingham at the AABP conference my junior year, and then I went back my senior year and met her again. And I really liked her. I really connected with her, and I thought she seems like a great vet, and I think her practice sounds really interesting. And I was looking for jobs on the West Coast. So I called her and she said, "We're not hiring right now, but we'll keep your information in mind." And then they called me back and they said, "We want you to come out so we can work with you because we are interested maybe in hiring." And that was it. I came out and I really connected with the whole team. Everybody was super nice. And I loved what they were doing every day and their perspectives and the dedication they had working with their clients, and that they were doing more than just preg checking cows. They were doing a lot more. I liked the consulting aspect, and it just felt like a really good fit. And I had a few job offers, but when this job offer came through, I knew this was the right one for me. And I was very lucky. Like you said, a lot of people don't stay with their first practice, but I was very lucky to find such a good fit right away. And I've stayed with the practice and since bought into the practice, and I'm a partner here now. And it's just a pleasure. I'm so happy that I did and that this opportunity came along.
Yeah. I think that is a very good call out, is networking. No matter where you are in the profession, that is going to come back to
Yeah.
probably being a good piece of advice. So I think that's great. And, just something, and maybe this is me being naive, so I apologize if it is, but the fact that you also met another woman in the profession, it just kind of stood out to me too. I think a lot of people probably think that this is something that more men might be attracted to. They're big animals. It's a physical job. And so if it's a girl who's nervous about that aspect of things, has that ever worried you? Like, I think I heard, and this is weird that I keep remembering this, but this is what happens when you listen to podcasts, is that you're 5'4". So, I mean, you're not as short as me, but you're also not 6 foot. So what are some of your experiences about, that maybe somebody might be worried about?
Yeah, there's definitely challenges to being a woman in this field, but honestly, I think there's challenges to being a man in this field too. Like everything comes with its pros and cons, right? But what you said about mentorship and support, that's really the key. So I was very lucky to join a practice that already had a vet who is a woman. And so everybody was used to it. Nobody thought anything of it. She had shown them that women can do the job just as well as men, albeit sometimes differently. We sometimes need to work differently to get the job done because, like, my upper arm strength is not that of my partners who are men, and I am not as tall as some of the other vets in my practice. But some men aren't tall either, like these physical attributes that make it a challenge, but they're physical attributes that make it a challenge. It really has nothing to do with gender. And so I've been very lucky that the practice has been very supportive and the clients as well. And I think a big part of that is because the way was paved for me. So I think being the first is probably hard sometimes. And I think in some areas of the country and with certain people, you're going to get more pushback than others. But usually once people see that a woman can do the job, then that's it. That's enough for them. They want the job to get done. And in my experience, that if there's pushback because you're a woman, it usually is more of a fear that the job won't get done. And so really you just have to show them that you can do it. And that's going to be a big part of it. Now, there's some people where you won't change their mind. The most challenging time for me as a woman in this field was when I was pregnant. So I've had 2 kids, and that was a really challenging time navigating being pregnant and then also having a newborn and this schedule and the physical nature of the job and the lifestyle. That was a really hard time for me, but I made it through, and here I am, and I'm glad I did. And I made it with a lot of support.
Yeah. Well, and you were doctor number 9 too. So that's nice that you aren't like, you know, Doc McDonald, who's the only
Yes.
vet, and you're the only one who's able to come if there's a need.
Yes.
So
We did a good job sharing and covering each other when we need to. And that is the nice thing about being part of a larger practice. We're 6 of us now, and it's very good because we are able to call when we need to. Somebody's usually able to get there earlier than others. Today I was on call and I had to switch call for a few things, and it was no big deal. I just said, "Hey, can somebody switch call for me?" Somebody jumped right in, and so there's always going to be someone that can get there. And if I'm on call and I happen to be really far away from where the call comes in, I can send out a text, "Hey, is anyone closer?" And so we're a very good team, and that's very helpful as well.
Yeah. The other thing that stood out to me when I heard you describe your, especially early experience, was that they never made you go on a call by yourself to start with. And I think that speaks volumes because I've heard lots of horror stories of people where they're just like, "All right, welcome to being a doctor. Here's your truck. Have fun." And they seem to support you a lot better there. And I think a lot of it is just building your confidence. So do you have any fun memories from the kind of gaining your confidence your first year or 2?
Yeah, there was a piece of advice given to me by one of the vets in the practice that stands out. And he said, there's a point where you know what to do and you have all the skills to do it. But what you need to know is what to do when something goes wrong. So, which basically comes back to confidence. You have to be able to not freak out if something goes wrong, and you have to be able to calmly handle the situation if it doesn't go the way the textbook says it will go. And so building confidence is a big part of that, definitely. my practice was very supportive. So I was always had someone else on call with me. First, we always went together, and then when they felt like I was ready to handle it alone, I would go, and then they would come shortly after to see where I was at, and then after that, I had basically a backup, so I was on call, but I had someone that I could call, and they knew they were on call for me, and they would come out if I said, "Hey, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do in this case," or whatever. Then they would come out, and then eventually I was on my own, but that was not until I was ready, and even then, I was still able to call around and find someone that would help talk me through a situation or come out if I needed them to, because they were a very supportive team. And that was really much appreciated by me. I think it was good for my confidence, but it was also good for the clients to see as well. I think the clients really appreciated that I was never looked at as someone who couldn't do the job, or sometimes I was the new vet and they knew sometimes I needed a little help, but they knew that the job would get done, and if I couldn't do it, someone else would be there, and so they still had a lot of faith in us as a practice.
Yeah. Now, you don't have technicians that ride with you, do you?
No.
Just you. So, I mean, do you kind of leverage whoever is at the farm if you need a hand? Is it the farmer and this I say farmer. I don't know if that's really the title that they use at some of these big farms. They probably have like much fancier titles, but are you like literally on your own? Or if you need help, do you just pull in somebody who is the staff?
There is always someone there to help us. And the people working on these farms are very well trained. We do a lot of training. The farmers do a lot of training. There is a lot of training that happens, and they're able to handle most basic emergencies. They're animal health technicians, basically, not certified, but they are very knowledgeable. Many of them have way more experience than I do handling these basic emergencies. And then we get called in when things are really bad. If it's beyond their control or they need medicines that they don't have, things like that. So there's always someone that's very knowledgeable on the farm that is able to help in any way, do what we need them to do to get the job done. And they're usually right there waiting. The others in my practice always joke that when I show up, I always have 6 people helping me, and when they show up, they've got 1 or 2 people, because they're like, maybe it is good to be a woman in this field. Everybody's very helpful to me, and I appreciate that. But sometimes I have to tell them, no, I don't need help. Because sometimes I have to tell people to back off. Like, it's fine. I got this, because too many hands in the kitchen can cause a problem. So yes, the answer to your question is I always have help. And if I don't have help, if I show up and it's a problem that I can't handle on my own, I can make a quick phone call and the farmer will send help. So I'm never left alone, which is good, because these animals are big and you need to have multiple people to help make sure that you're being safe.
Exactly, safety. Well, going back to training, because you started the company DairyKind, and that is an education platform. So around education, do you mind sharing the story of how you started that?
Yes. Dairy farms have to go through a lot of training. They have multiple audits, evaluations that they go through per year, and a big part of each of those is training. And we, as the veterinarians, were doing a lot of that training. We would hold classes. We would have group trainings where everybody would get together from a certain department on the dairy, maybe all of the maternity technicians. And we would talk about maternity, signs of labor, and how to help if needed, and when to call the veterinarian, things like that. And that was a lot of fun. And I still do that. And I love that part of my job. But we realized that we're not there every day, and we can't be there every day. And yet they're hiring every day. And there was this gap there that people weren't able to be formally trained immediately. They would get the on-the-job training, but they really should be getting very clear expectations and have some formal foundational training from day one. And then the audits and evaluations that they go through require annual training as well. And so trying to track that, when was the last time we did a training? It was getting to be a challenge because there's a lot of people and there's a lot of different requirements. So we really just saw a need for a system that helped deliver training. And then we created DairyKind based on that need. There are 7 of us veterinarians that own DairyKind. We have developed over 45 different training modules based on animal welfare, standard of care, best practices within dairy farming on common procedures that they do, as well as safety trainings. And then that is accessible to them on their mobile device in their native language at any time so that they can start training and get that basic foundation. And then we as veterinarians can still come in and do the trainings that we were doing, but we're building upon that. So now we're able to say, okay, you have a basic understanding of colostrum and what colostrum is and why it's important. So now we're going to talk about the protocols that we as the veterinarians have written for this farm. So we can do some more specific training, talk about, okay, this is the equipment we use on this farm. This is the facilities that we're using. And this is the protocols that we've written. This is the expectations. But it's a really nice way to deliver that training more immediately and fill that gap in training needs.
It also makes me think, could this be good for other audiences? Something you shared with me in our pre-call, it just really stood out, was that, you talked about sometimes you're driving 3-4 hours to a farm, and you mentioned that sometimes you pass veterinary clinics on those drives. And so there is an opportunity to address access for care for these small animal clinics who are much closer to some of these different species of animals that, even if you did track, you got a little bit of education on them. But is that something that maybe this program could either be used for, or is that maybe a future direction you might go to help, small animal veterinarians who are out there who have the ability to help some of these animals feel a little bit more confident working with them?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of modules based on veterinary procedures. It's more like we have one on stockmanship, we have one on maternity, we have one on lameness, common things that are happening on farms. And I think I see it more as an opportunity to get people that are interested in working on a farm or are looking for a job, some basic training so that they can get that job or they can be more qualified to do the things of that job, because there's definitely a labor shortage on dairy farms across the United States. It's very hard to find people to come work on dairy farms and then to get them to stay. And with the high turnover rates, I think we need to be expanding our reach and looking outwards to more areas. Like how many high schoolers in the United States think of working on a dairy farm as a possible career path? Not very many. Maybe some ag students or maybe people that grew up on a dairy, but it is not the responsibility of people within agriculture to feed the whole world without any help from anyone else, right? There are maybe other people like me who might have been interested in working on a farm. And if we can recruit some of those people and help them see that this is a possibility, this is a career choice that you could make. And just because you didn't grow up on a farm doesn't mean that you can't get a job here. I think that there's a lot of power in that. Back to your question about accessibility of care, I do think that there is a lot of opportunity for small animal veterinarians to be able to provide some basic care in rural areas. If there is not a vet in the area, as a small animal veterinarian, you know how to cast a broken leg. You know how to fix up wounds if a sheep got attacked by a dog, which happens more often than you think. And now you have an owner with a bunch of sheep that have wounds, dog bites, and they need to be sewn up and they need to be assessed and they need to be lavaged. And so can the small animal veterinarian help fill that need for those very rural areas? I think so. And I think that they can access the kind of education that you're talking about through the different organizations. Like AABP is for bovine practitioners, but there's ASRP for small ruminant practitioners. There's AEP for equine practitioners. I don't think you should do things outside of your scope if you have zero training on it. Maybe you shouldn't be floating a horse's teeth, but you could go and get that training. You learned it in school, the basics of it. So you can refresh that right along with a veterinarian in the area and help improve access to care. I think that we need to work together, though, as a profession as well. If that's something that you're willing or interested in doing, talking to the other vets in your area. Maybe there's one vet that serves a whole county. And if you talk to them and they said, yeah, you know what, we really need someone to be willing to write health papers so I can be out doing the kind of more involved procedures. A small animal veterinarian can learn how to do that. And so I think that communication within the industry too is what's going to help fill that need.
I definitely see the benefit of better communication among our profession too, because again, I've seen comments from people within our profession that just kind of shock me that they would say that about large animal medicine, So I think the more that we can understand and support each other, it's a great starting place, right? And even on a One Health perspective, all animals have a One Health perspective. And I think the more that we can understand that and see the potential, wherever there's an animal, veterinarians need to be.
Yeah, well, I go to some sheep and goat places that are smaller, and they need veterinary care just as much as these bigger places. And many of them would be willing to haul their animals in to a clinic. So if that's something that a clinic is open to, just being open to, yeah, you need a goat euthanized, I can do that because you can. As a small animal veterinarian, that is something that you can do. You may need to ask around and make sure your dosages are right and things like that, but you have the skills to do it. And so I think people are very quick to just say, well, that's not the species I work with, so no, I won't do that. But there just is a shortage of veterinarians, and we may need to be more open-minded. I right now have a client that has goats, and then they got some emu, and they said, can you be my emu vet? And I said, oh, I'm not an emu vet. And they said, well, there is no emu vet. We've been asking around and nobody's willing to see our emu. And I said, well, I guess I'm an emu vet. I was very upfront with them. I don't know that much about emu, but I can learn. And they said, great, we'll learn together, because they were also new to emu. And now I'm an emu vet. And I have reached out to some professors at some different universities and the emu organizations, and I've done some CE, and so I know some basic emu care. But that's just an example. I don't want to be a full-time emu vet, but these species didn't have anyone. They had nobody. And I don't want to say, well, too bad, then you can't have any veterinary care, because I have gone out there and sewed up wounds, and I have investigated some problems that they've had, and I have advised them on nutrition and things like that, because I have access to some different information than they have. And I may not be an expert, but I can help connect them with the right people. I can learn some things and then teach them what I've learned, and that's better than nothing, right? And so we need to remember that all animals, like you said, need health care, and that may mean that we need to be more open-minded to what animals we're willing to serve.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're really appreciative
Yeah.
for anything that you give.
Right. Yeah.
So they were very well aware that there was nobody who was an emu vet,
Mhm.
and the fact that you went and looked up information or went and asked some connection that through, again, this networking that is so important to do. I'm sure they're extremely appreciative for anything that you do, and that can be really rewarding.
And we're not alone, especially I think in large animal, when you're just driving around in your truck and you are alone, you feel kind of alone, but we're not. One of the connections that I made is I bought a book about emu, and it was the book about emu. And when I looked up the author, he's a professor at one of the veterinary schools. So then I just emailed him and I said, hey, I bought your book and I've been reading, but I have these questions. And he was super nice. And he emailed me back. And now we email quite regularly about these emu. And that's just an example. We do have resources. There are people willing to help. And the veterinary profession, I think, is very friendly and open to other veterinarians and helping advise people. And there are resources out there. So we can't forget that even on days that we feel alone or we feel like maybe we've messed up a case or we don't know what to do with a case, reach out to colleagues, reach out to organizations, look things up. The help and support is there, but sometimes you just have to go look for it.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. That's my experience as well. Especially if you've called about something that they're interested in.
Yes.
Oh, they're usually, oh, how much time do you have? Like,
yeah.
So they're usually very excited to chat about it. And I'm so glad that you are really trying to connect education and this area. You have a huge social media following as well. And you shared that people really are curious where their food is. And I see a huge disconnect with the average person and their food. And so the fact that, watching what you do every day, it helps. And you are a trustworthy source. And so what has your experience been like jumping into social media, which probably a lot of people are terrified to do as well. But what has it been like with social media?
It's been fun. The very first video I ever posted was on TikTok, and I had to have a Gen Zer help me set up my TikTok because I didn't really know what I was doing, but she helped me set it up and she was very nice. And now she's in vet school and she's going to graduate soon. And it's cool to see students grow up and get inspired to work with veterinary medicine. But she helped me set it up. And so I posted this first video and it was about how cows are milked in the milking parlor. Very first video. I had 0 followers. It was on TikTok. And it got, within days, 73,000 views. And I was like, oh, I guess people are interested in this. So now I'm committed and I was excited to keep going. So I kept going, posting, and I posted a little bit of different things every day. I tried some of the trendy stuff that didn't really work. And then I did a quiz. Can you guess if this animal is male or female? And I showed a bull, a steer, a heifer, and a cow. And so many people got it wrong. It was so interesting. And then they started arguing in the comments, and that one got over 100,000 views. And it just, it just kept going, snowballed from there. And it's been really cool to see it grow and take off and to answer people's questions. I try to be really open-minded and respectful, and that would be my biggest piece of advice. I see a lot of veterinarians online that are sort of making fun of people for not knowing, or when they get some hate, which in agriculture, we get a lot of animal activists that just disagree with farming as a whole, that's an ethical opinion, that's fine, but they can be pretty aggressive about it, and that's hard. But when those things come in, if we're going to comment on their use of their and not their and where they put the apostrophe, that's not really helping your case or helping the profession. We don't need to belittle other people to make our point. I just ignore some of the comments that are really aggressive like that, or sometimes I'll engage, but kind of pick out one piece and say, hey, let me tell you about this a little bit more because it doesn't sound like you understand it very well. And when you stay really respectful, that's going to keep a good name for the profession. I do think veterinarians are a trusted source and are seen as a third party, and they're seen as committed to animal welfare and these things that are very important to the public. But there's also an idea that veterinary care is overpriced and that veterinarians just want money and things like that. So I think we have a heavy responsibility that we need to present the profession as positive and present it as respectful and make sure we're keeping a good name for veterinarians, because we have the public trust, but we could lose it. And I don't want that to happen. So saying respectful and kind of as a third party is very important.
I completely agree. And I think we're seeing that now is that we are starting to lose a little bit of trust as people do more research and have stronger opinions. And if we aren't able to be open and good listeners and work with them, it's very easy to start turning people away. Not to mention that cost of care is going up, so
Yes.
that they're having more and more reasons to walk away. So I like that, to be good representation of the profession as a whole. Yeah. I know that sounds like a huge responsibility, but we do our part, each person, and I think we'll do pretty well.
Yeah, and on my side, I really enjoy helping people understand what goes on the farms, because many people, like I as a kid, never had the opportunity to really engage with farms at all, and being able to hear it from a veterinarian I think is important, and then help people feel more confident in their food choices. I'm not here to convince anyone that they have to drink a certain type of milk, but I want them to think critically about the choices they're making and make informed choices, and not just buy one thing over another based on some fear tactics that are in the media or in marketing. It's important, I think, for people to have trust in the food that they buy and to make these decisions based on facts and not based on emotion. So I try to talk about labels and milk and how you make your choices and things like that, as well as give a little glimpse of common procedures on the farm, common myths that I hear, maybe just a snippet of my day. And I do think those things help people feel more comfortable with modern farming, because it's different than what's pictured in the storybooks. And that's a whole separate conversation. But just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad. So I enjoy telling the truth about what is happening on farms that I go to, and helping people see that there are really great things being done in the dairy industry.
Yeah. Well, time has just flown by. Before I ask my final question, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure to share with the veterinary community about your career path, or anything from your perspective?
I think the biggest thing is just to be open-minded and to network, really. There are so many connections to be had within the veterinary world, but then also outside of it. And those things will only make you better and stronger. And so if we get too closed off in our own little worlds, we forget that there's so much more to the world. And it's important to connect with others. That's why I'm so happy to be here with you today. I mean, you're in a totally different world than I am. And yet, as we talk, we have so many commonalities. And those things are very important, very important. So if we can all work together as a team and realize that we're all a little more connected than we realize, and then being open-minded to other areas of veterinary medicine, that's really important as well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, my last question is always, what is something that you're very grateful for right now?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. Something that I'm very grateful for right now is all of the support that I have. I have a lot of support from my family, my husband, my kids. I have a lot of support from my practice. And then I have outside support as well. I am the chair of the Animal Welfare Committee at AABP, and I'm going to the AABP conference. And every time I go to a conference like that in an organization, especially a veterinary medicine organization, I just feel so fulfilled and revived. I mean, looking around the room and seeing all of that support that I have is something that just fills my heart. And I get a lot of opportunities too. I mean, I'm speaking at that conference, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity to speak. And I think all of that comes from the support that we have, for me in my personal life, but then in our professional lives as well. I think we all have probably more support than we realize, and we need to draw on that. So I'm very grateful for all of the support I have in my life.
From suburban beginnings to leading the dairy world, Michelle's story proves that open-mindedness and the right network can take your veterinary career places you never imagined. Vet Life Reimagined is reaching more veterinary professionals every week, with guests from every corner of our profession sharing their wisdom, their struggles, and their wins. Think of each story as adding another tool in your toolbox. A special thank you to Dr. Kelly Cooper. Her consulting and speaking help veterinary teams thrive, and her support makes conversations like today possible. One of the best ways to support the podcast is to make sure you follow and subscribe. And even bigger is leaving a rating and review on your favorite platform. And if this conversation reminded you of someone, send them the episode. You never know when an action like that could be exactly what that person needed. Until next time, keep reimagining veterinary life and keep making it uniquely yours.